Right, welcome back. We have seen chapter 1, broad introduction to the subject of market research. Before we go into the principles in market research, let's learn a little bit about the industry, the market research as an industry in our country today. Right, let's go forward. As mentioned very briefly when we talked about primary research, primary research is divided into consumer research, industrial product research, social research. And the market research industry in our country also follows these broad classifications. So consumer product research, industrial product research, social research, and one thing which I did not mention is market research, KPO. In case you're not familiar, KPO stands for knowledge, process, outsourcing. Essentially, it's business which comes from international companies to Indian companies to do the work here. We have it in software, we have it in call centers, you've all heard about voice processes, non-voice processes. So market research has its own processes, right? So let's go forward, very briefly look at what each of these kinds of industries are. So consumer research is the most visible phase of market research. I mean, typically when we talk about market research, we think of consumer product market research. We think of research on cell phones, research things on cars, on cigarettes, on soft drinks, right? These are all consumer products. So on FMCG, which stands for fast moving consumer goods, or consumer durables like refrigerators and so on and so forth, or automobiles like cars and two-wheelers, healthcare like corporate hospitals, or about digital consulting apps. BFSI, can you tell me what it stands for?
Banking, finance.
Banking, very good. Then? Financial. And then? BFSI is financial services, okay? And? B is banking, FS is financial services. Did I?
Insurance.
Insurance, excellent. So this is a big industry by itself, ICICI, Cholamandalam, and so on and so forth, right? Personal IT products like laptop, mobile phone, etc., etc. Basically relying on consumer products. You'll also find something on employee here. Why? Because managing employees is also a little like managing consumers or managing a brand. To the employee, the company is a brand. The employee has some expectations from the company, the employee has some perceptions about the company. Employee is working for company A, he has a very good perception about company B, so he changes the job when he gets an opportunity. Right? We think he changes the job because he gets a better salary. But sometimes he changes because they think it's a better company to work for, a better brand to work for. Therefore, employee management is also a form of brand management. And therefore, market research principles are relevant there as well. Right? And then there is political polls. We have all read a lot of opinion polls, BJP will win the election, DMK will win the election, so on and so forth. So many seats, so many percentage of the vote share. That is a field by itself. But it uses the same fundamental principles of sampling and questionnaire design that any other market research uses. So opinion polls and political polls are also market research application areas. Right? So all this come under consumer product research. The next would be industrial product research. So this deals with manufacturing products or B2B situations. So for example, let us say we have got a company that makes the steering wheel for the car, right? So that's a component. Now this company that makes a steering wheel for the car can sell it directly to the car manufacturer. Right, so it can sell it directly to car manufacturer. It can also sell the spare parts in the spare parts shops, mechanic shop, repair shop, as we call it, right? Now this portion, if the company is following a new kind of steering wheel, better technology, better power steering, something, all that comes from the industrial, because they want to get the feedback from the car manufacturer. That is when it becomes industrial product research. It could be mechanical products, could be chemical products, could be electrical products, but essentially engineering related. So we give some examples here. Market potential for components for gears, And there's something called harmonics when it comes to power, and harmonics are bad for the equipment and therefore they need to be modulated. Right? Now, two important reasons why industrial product research is different from consumer product research is because domain knowledge is more important here, because technical matters get discussed in an industrial product research. Consumer product research is more about perception, not about actual technology. Industrial product research is more about actual technology. Therefore, domain knowledge becomes extremely important, right? Secondly, the universe is small. But what they say in the universe? For example, the same company that makes steering wheel, and it sells it to car manufacturers. Totally in our country, there are only about 25 car manufacturers. Even worldwide, there may be not more than 500 or 1000 car manufacturers. So the universe is small. Therefore, sampling methods also need to be different. The typical consumer universe runs into crores of people. India's population is 130 crores. Therefore, the population relevant to, say, Socrates, for example, is 100 crores of people, adults. Therefore, the sampling methods there are different. Sampling methods in industrial products are different. That's why this is a separate field by itself. Right? Can you go forward?
I have a question.
Yes.
When you say domain knowledge is very important for doing industrial product research,
Right.
With respect to doing consumer research also, there are technical products, there are technical industries like, say, banking, financial services and all that, where you need to know something about the domain, right? Would it not be, would it be easy for anyone to do it?
To a certain extent, it is easy for anyone to do it. But domain knowledge doesn't hurt anywhere. If you understand insurance, for example, how insurance works, you can do the research better than if you don't understand how the insurance works. Because when you write a questionnaire, you must feed in relevant parameters on which the consumer evaluates. Likewise, if you understand how cooking works, you can write a questionnaire about cooking oil better than somebody who doesn't do any cooking. But having said that, it is easier to learn those concepts. Or at least it is easier to learn those concepts well enough to match a consumer's knowledge. Now, let me take a step back. This basically comes from the marketing principle that the consumer decides between brands based on perception, not actually on technical comparison. So the average consumer doesn't know which car is technically manufactured better than some other car. He goes by perception, he goes by belief in what the car manufacturers are communicating. So you go by, am I sitting comfortably in this car? You don't go by, is the material made of XYZ kind of Rexin or, ABC kind of Rexin. You don't know and you don't care. You just talk about comfort. So, when you buy a refrigerator, you're more concerned about, does it cool and keep my vegetables fresh? You don't actually know the technology behind it. I mean, somebody will talk about some ingredient and all, so you feel knowledgeable. But really speaking, you're not that knowledgeable. Whereas in industrial product research, you're talking to a purchase manager or the manufacturing manager sitting on the customer side, who he knows the technology as well as you know the technology. So the researcher needs to know the technology very well.
Okay.
That is really where this comes from. It comes from the marketing fund is involved, not from the research principles alone.
Okay.
Right? So let's go forward. So social research. This is the unglamorous part of market research. This talks about research on child welfare, how to ensure women's health after they have had a delivery. It invariably addresses the poorer segments. Because, your bodies like, UNICEF and AIDS control bodies, which are trying to educate poor people in how to maintain their health better and so on and so forth. So, this research is almost always about rural consumers and poor consumers and trying to understand the impact of education campaigns, their understanding of certain things, their behavior, hygiene behavior, for example. Right? Do they wash their hands after going to the toilet? And if a campaign, after that, there's a percentage of people washing their hands increase. So it is focused on those kind of not-for-profit activities, and the clients are not-for-profit organizations. Here, the principles of questionnaire design and sampling are the same. and like consumer research. But the researcher needs to spend time talking to people on the field, and they have to go to remote places and so forth. Yes.
So is it more rural related and
rural and poorer sections by and large. By and large. There are exceptions, like you can have a petroleum conservation survey which is meant for the middle class and upper class as well. But by and large, this is rural and poorer urban sections, because that is when social upliftment is necessary. And social organizations concentrate on those kind of places and people. Right? Let's go forward.
I have a question.
Yes.
So there are a lot of studies which the government does. So
commissions, yes.
Yeah. So would you
the word is commissions.
Commissions. Okay. So would you consider them as social research, or would you consider them as market research? Say, for example, they do some studies to understand to what extent people would like to people welcome the new education policy. To what extent, what are the kind of things that they want to be added in the new education policy, or things like in the process of Digital India, the whole path that they are taking. To what extent are people aware of it, or to what extent people are benefited from that? So, how would you classify these kind of studies?
Okay, excellent question. I have never been asked this question before. Let me answer this at several levels. Before that, I have noted a typing mistake in my slide here. This is data collection, sorry. Right. You have talked about, firstly, you was asked, would you consider this social research or market research? Social research is still a part of market research.
Sorry, I meant social research or consumer research.
Or commercial research. Okay, now, the first example that you gave of what people think about the new education policy, if you ask the general public what they think about it, and I'm giving you my opinion here, and there's no hard and fast rule book that I'm referring to. I'm just giving you my opinion here. If you ask the general public, I would still consider it market research, because the general public is just even the perception-based feedback. But if we ask the affected segments, like teachers or people who are in the plus two, because the new education policy, for example, says you have to choose whether you want a 3-year degree or a 4-year degree. And if you want to go to higher studies, you should have a 4-year degree. But the higher degree becomes a 1-year course, if I've understood it correctly, right? So if you interview the affected parties, the stakeholders, so to speak, which is 12th standard students and their parents and the teachers and so on and so forth, then I could call it social research. I could call it social research because it's not for profit.
Okay.
Right. The second example of Digital India and how it impacts people, if you focus on poorer people, financial inclusiveness, it's definitely social research. There's no two ways about it. Okay. But yes, the examples that you gave indicate that, this is not like this. This is more like this. And there are some gray areas.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. Let's go forward. Final thing that we talked about is market research KPO. So this is about 20 years old. This became possible because call centers took off well, excellent internet connections. In India, labor is cheaper than in the US, for example. That's how it all started. Same thing applies to market research. So the bulk of the work here is data processing. There are some other data management services. The bulk is data processing. The bulk is to English-speaking companies, US, UK, Australia. Right, and what's really happening here is that, the large multinational market research companies, worldwide operators, they have their own back office in India. That is a big employer. And the other thing is the large software firms in India like TCS and Cognizant, etc., also maintain market research KPO operations. Right? So they are the big employers here, and they're huge in terms of number of people that they employ and the turnover in rupee terms. Right? So this is broadly what KPO is all about. Can we go forward? Maybe a little bit more detailing on KPO will help, and we'll come to that. So the Indian market research industry is a very mature industry. It's growing very rapidly. It's a good industry to get into in terms of employment prospects. There are two global leaders. There is Kantar and Nielsen. multinational. Both of them have a strong presence in India, right? They are globally, they're the one number one, number two. That's the same case in India as well. There are some of the multinational players, like there is a company called, I'm so sorry, we have to go back one slide. There's a company called Gallup, for example, right? And there are some large, completely Indian-owned market research players as well. Plus, there are several dozen boutique market research players who offer the full range of services but in limited markets to a smaller set of clients. And they have a smaller team of researchers who are giving a very high level of involvement to the projects, right? And there are some specialist qualitative research outputs. They do only one branch of market research called qualitative research. We will see that in the next few chapters, right? We'll have one full chapter for qualitative research, in fact. But the big markets for market research in India are Bombay and Delhi, and to some extent Bangalore as well. These are the three markets where by and large companies are located, and therefore there's no market research is also thriving business. Several large market research KPO firms, as I said, three kinds: back office, the worldwide players, pure play KPO firms, and companies like TCS, which have got a market research KPO outfit, right? We'll just say a little bit more about this and then we can wind up this chapter. There are also pure play data collection firms called field agencies. Right? It will be a couple of dozen firms in every state. So, Tamil Nadu alone will have 25, 30 such people. Delhi alone will have 30 or 40 such. These are all one man, two man, three man shops, which doesn't mean they do a bad job. They do a good job. They do as good a job as anybody else. But they operate in limited geographies. And then there are some call centers that focus on market research telephonic service, which is also a big part of market research too, right? And these people have got telecallers who are fluent and well versed in many languages, many Indian languages, right? So what does market research as industry offer for people like you as a career opportunity? Let's have a look at that. At any given point in time, this industry has a shortfall of people. So there's always job opportunities here, right? And what does it need to be a successful market researcher? A good market researcher must understand research theory very well, must understand brand management and consumer behavior concepts very well, because this is a part of that whole field, right? Must have excellent English communication skills, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with corporates, and English is the medium of business in our country. Some basic comfort with mathematics. You don't have to be somebody who can do mental maths. You don't have to be a maths genius. But you should have a basic comfort with numbers. You can't be a good researcher if you say you're scared of numbers. Well, within market research, there is a field, as I said, called qualitative research, where numbers don't play any role. But I would still say that a basic comfort with numbers is necessary for any kind of market research. There's another important thing that I want to draw attention to here. Many people seem to think, I've even seen market research textbooks, which will initially show this normal distribution curve and so on and so forth, and some formulae and so on and so forth. It gives you the impression that market research is a very quantitative subject, is very much like statistics, right? Market research is a quantitative subject, but it is not the same as statistics. Statistics is one of the tools that we apply in market research. We have a chapter on how statistics helps market research. We'll come to that. But market research is much more than statistics. It takes some principles from statistics, but market research is primarily a branding subject, a marketing subject. A good statistician need not be a good market researcher. A good market researcher need not be a good statistician. It is nice to have both, but it's not necessary, right? So any questions on this? Yes, please.
So when you say a good market researcher need not be a good statistician, then how do you make sense of the data? How do you give your interpretation of what the data is for your clients?
Okay, we will come to that when we come to, specific answer to your question. We will come to a chapter called significance testing. Okay? And in significance testing, you can be a statistician and you can sit and work out all the formulae and you can come to the conclusion. But I will also talk about a method by which you can just feed something into a computer and you get one thing out of it. And if you read that, it is enough to decide to form your conclusion. However, your question is relevant in the sense you need to know the principle behind significance testing. And to be very honest, maybe a little cynical, it is not that every good statistician knows the principle behind statistics. They may just know the formula. What I'm trying to impress here is that you need to know the principle behind the statistics, not necessarily the formula.
Okay. So
There are tools which we are
I'm a fresher,
and
I want to make sense of the data.
Sure.
Just by looking at the numbers, how would I be able to make sense of it without?
Many people talk about good statistics knowledge as how to do the test. What I'm talking about is the researcher needs to know when to do which test. The computer can do the how. That's one part. I'm not advising ignore statistics. I'm only saying that don't be bogged down or intimidated because you don't understand statistics very well. You don't need to know the formula.
Okay.
You need to know the application.
Okay. So would it be right to say that I need to understand marketing principles much more than I understand statistics?
Absolutely. No two ways about it. And the way the industry works is you can hire a statistician. But your primary job is to interpret the data. A statistician can tell you whether something is significant or not. From there, what? What does it mean for the brand? That is your job as a researcher. Right? So shall we close this chapter here?